right, everybody. I saw Bone Temple at a early screening last night. So let's go ahead and dive in. I've got a lot to say about this film. My my next video, I think I'm going to do a rant video. So be prepared for that, but let's jump into the spoiler-free review. Starting off with the synopsis here, we basically follow Spike after he's been recruited into the Jimmy Crystal gang. And we have two different stories that are happening. We have Spike, who has been unwillingly thrusted into this situation with these psychopathic freaks in this cult. And then we have Dr. Kelson, who is making almost like a last-ditch effort in order to find out if there's any humanity left in the infected and if there's any possible way to save them. So we have these two parallel stories that are happening at the same time, and they end up lining up towards the end and crossing. And that is the general consensus here. There isn't really much of a plot. I know that sounds like it could be very sophisticated, but to me personally, this film and its plot alone felt very episodic. It didn't feel like a full-length film itself. It felt more like it was just chapters. But that's the general idea. It's not nearly as interesting as 28 years later as far as the plot or really any of the predecessors. Jumping into cinematography, we have the director, Nia DaCosta, here. I have not been a fan of, I don't think, any of her previous films. And, I mean, she's definitely talented, and I do feel like this is by far the best thing that she's done. But this film, cinematography-wise, it loses a lot of that beauty. It loses a lot of that color grading and the gorgeous tones and the fiery colors and the bright and the saturated and all of that stuff that made the last one feel so otherworldly. We lose all of that. This film was not shot on iPhones, except for a few select scenes. So normal cameras were used for this movie. There are some interesting perspectives that we get. We get to see from certain points of views that we haven't before, and that was interesting. Kind of added a little bit of depth, and it made me interested to see like what that means. But overall, the cinematography here did not feel nearly as artistic, nearly as grand scale, or nearly as beautiful as we saw in 28 years later. VFX here, entirely practical to my recollection. I don't think that there was any CGI used. There may have been, but if I had to guess right now, I would say no. The practical effects here are insane. The gore is absolutely insane. This is by far the bloodiest and most fucked up 28 film that we've gotten yet. There are scenes in this movie that are on scale or on the level of certain scenes in Terrifier. It is unbelievable and actually kind of borders into torture times. And I did not really like that much. I felt like it was a little gratuitous. I mean, I understand like why it was happening, so it wasn't completely meaningless like a lot of those other hardcore films. It definitely did feel like it was a bit much, though. It wasn't like super hard to watch for me personally, but I just didn't understand why we needed to see as much as we saw. It just felt kind of meaningless at times, even though in the context of the scene, you know what's happening and there's a reason behind it. There is another scene as well where it's something that the Alpha does, and it is disgusting and really gave me flashbacks to When Evil Lurks. So that was shocking as well. I mean, honestly, the violence in this film is just absolutely shocking. And it's very fast-paced, very frenetic. But yeah, overall, the VFX I thought was done really well here. And I love, as always, the lack of CGI and the reliance on more practical effects. Regarding the sound, design, and the score, I would also say this is a step down from the previous film. There are some, I guess you could call needle drops that happen in here that are pretty fun, but to me personally, I just didn't like. I know this is going to be a controversial take, but I didn't feel like they fit into the sequence that it happened in. I didn't feel like it. I don't know. I just didn't feel what everybody else seems to be feeling for this specific needle drop that everyone's going to be talking about. it didn't feel as impactful or even appropriate in a lot of ways to me personally. And I don't know, maybe people that are into, I guess, like older music and that kind of thing from back in the day, maybe they would be more likely to really get a kick out of it. But for me personally, it just didn't do it for me. There were some good songs that were, put throughout, like needle drop wise. It's really just the one at the end that just, it didn't fit for me. It didn't work for me, unfortunately. I really, really was hoping that it would. I mean, I was so disappointed with that portion, especially because that's what I was looking forward to the most, because I had heard so much about it and it just did not live up to expectations. I will say the score here as well. They did a similar thing like in 28 Years Later, where there's a lot of original ethereal scores that are carried over here from the previous film, and then that primary theme we get very sparsely throughout the film. The sound effects themselves, the sound design and sound editing is really well done. It's much more effective. I would say this is the most effective jump scares that the entire franchise has had. They did a really good job of building tension with the sound. So I think the sound is definitely one of the highlights of the film, but also one of the lowest parts for me personally. And the part that I'm going to be the absolute most positive on is definitely the performances. Ray Fiennes is, I mean, saying that he's good in the film is just kind of cliche at this point. He was outstanding here, much more contemplative, much more patient and compassionate. It was just really cool to see this type of character in this world. And Jack O'Connell as this Jimmy Crystal character was pretty terrifying. I mean, I don't think he was as good in this as he was in Sinners, but he still held that presence and that manic behavior. I would have liked to have seen his character do more himself, but I guess that almost would defeat the purpose of a cult leader. He was definitely very unpredictable, and I think that's what made him so terrifying. He really hammed it up and just went all out with this performance, and it was honestly spectacular at times. The writing portion of his performance and his character I have issues with, but as far as his own performance with what he was given, he did phenomenal. I mean, I think he probably, it's difficult to even like compare like him and Ray Fiennes, because they're just two powerhouses in this film, and they're both just equally magnificent. And I would say Spike as well. I think that he was a bit more tame in this one and a bit more neutered emotionally than he was in the previous, and that was a bit disappointing because we got to see a really wide range of emotions with his character. It's the actor's name. It's Alfie Williams, I think. And he definitely didn't have as much to work with here either. I would say that the actor that plays the main alpha, Samson, he definitely had a bit more to work with here, but it was not really an emotional role. It was just more the whole time, just kind of like in the previous one. There are some interesting dynamics that happen with him and with Ray Fiennes' character, but I would definitely say that Ray Fiennes and Jack O'Connell here carry the entire film. If it wasn't for them, like, this film wouldn't even be good in my opinion. Like, they really knocked it out of the park here. I have issues with the writing with their characters, but as performances, they did excellent. There are several actors playing the other Jimmy characters in the gang because they're all named Jimmy, and overall, I don't feel like any of them really had much character, much opportunity to really go anywhere. They all felt kind of one note and like they just were along for the ride. I would have liked to see a bit more dynamic between the group, but it just felt like there was one character alone that befriended Spike, and she was like the only one other than Jack O'Connell that actually had more of a personality. The others were just kind of faceless thugs, if that makes sense. So definitely a film that is entirely weighing upon dual performances, like between Ray Fiennes and between Jack O'Connell. Like, they carry the film, and there isn't much else performance-wise outside of them. Regarding the writing, I need to preface this by saying that I was really looking forward to this movie. If you've seen my 28 Years Later review, I really loved that film, and I loved the emotional storyline that we have and the personal ties that has with my own life. And I felt like that movie really had dynamic characters, and everybody in the film, for the most part, seemed interesting and different. And I just feel like we don't get that here. Jack O'Connell as Jimmy Crystal does a phenomenal job with his performance, but the writing behind his character, he rarely does anything himself, and that really kind of bothered me. And yes, he's magnetic, and you know, it's hard to look away when he's on the screen, and it's easy to get wrapped up in that. But from my background, like in writing, I just had issues with that portion. I understand that he's a cult leader, and I understand that he's supposed to be the one making orders and telling them to do stuff, but a leader would lose respect if he didn't also do the things that his people did. And I felt like his story kind of goes into a disappointing direction towards the end of the film, and the same exact thing can be said for Kelson. Ray Fiennes here is phenomenal in his performance. He's charismatic and compassionate and patient and all of these things, and there's like so many emotions and thoughts that you can read just from his eyes, which really is just such a phenomenal job on his part. But I feel like some of the things that the character of Dr. Kelson does in this film, it not only destroys any continuity with the rest of the franchise, but it also has some of the largest illogical plot holes that I've seen in a long time. Like, I'm going to go into it in my video where I do a rant, but there are parts of this story with Dr. Kelson that it just literally retcons like so much, and it ignores so much from previous films, and in a way it kind of ruined the film for me. It just doesn't make sense, and if you take longer than a few seconds to even think about it, and think about the implications of what's happening, and think about the history that we've seen in the previous 3 films, it just falls flat. It doesn't hold under any scrutiny at all. And that really bothered me. There are lots of issues like that in this film where things just don't make sense if you consider the rest of the franchise, which all of the films prior to this are canon. So they're all the same story, the same world. And I think that that is the biggest thing that this franchise has suffered from, is consistency. You know, we fix one thing where we're consistent with how the virus is transmitted, but then we come up with inconsistencies in different areas. I think that Spike as well, the character's a bit frustrating. He's the end of 28 Years Later made us think that Spike was coming into his own and that he was becoming almost like a man, right? That's like what the whole hunt was. It was a rite of passage. It was a coming of age journey, and all this other stuff with his mom in 28 Years Later. Like, that was all to develop him and make him into a stronger character. And then in this film, he feels even weaker. He feels even more useless. He doesn't feel like the same character to me. Like, he felt like he was even weaker, more pathetic than he was in the previous one. At the end of 28 Years Later, it's like, at least now he can handle himself. He's surviving on his own. And then this movie comes along and he's just incapable of doing anything. And I feel like they really did him an injustice to that. I feel like they really did the character wrong. And that honestly bothered me, because he felt almost like a damsel in distress. You know, like, we don't need those kind of characters. Like, it's such an old trope, and I don't know. He just felt like he didn't have any independence, and he was consistently reliant on other people. And I just didn't like it. And for the other people in the Jimmy Crystal gang, I kind of mentioned this before in the performances category. They lacked personality. There was only one of them that kind of like befriended Spike, and she had more lines than any of the other ones except for Jack O'Connell. And even her, she's very one note. It just feels like all of the gang are one note. There's not a lot of differences between them. They all feel like they're just kind of there. Like, they're just faceless thugs that are just doing their master's bidding. And I didn't like that. I like a little bit of variety with my goons. yeah, I mean, I just got to say that the writing was the biggest letdown here for me, and I can't blame that. I can't fault Nia DaCosta on that. I definitely think that this is like a weaker entry in Alex Garland's writing credits. It felt like everything was kind of rushed, that there wasn't a lot of thought that was put into everything that came prior, and that they just wanted to get something out, and I really hate that. So those are my thoughts on the writing, and unfortunately, it's the part where I'm most critical on this film. And now for my overall rating, guys, I can't express to you how excited I was for this movie. I was like speed racing to get to the theater, and because I was so pumped, and got in my chair and I was like all ready to go and everything. And I left the theater just like, why are people so pumped about this movie? Why is it getting all of these fantastic reviews and getting all of this praise and buzz and everything? Yeah, it's shocking, sure. There are great performances, sure. But that alone can't carry a film. It can't carry a story. Those are just parts of a story. And I don't know if it's that general audiences, like maybe it's more digestible to general audiences. Maybe it's like at that medium where it's not as sophisticated as 28 years later, but it's sophisticated enough, while being like a crowd pleaser. But it just felt to me like this film is very overhyped. And it's funny because I had a friend who really hated Weapons last year, and I loved Weapons. It's AJ Russo over at Kaiju Live, if you want to check them out. He's a great guy. But he really hated Weapons, and I really loved Weapons. And when I talked about this last night coming out of the screening, AJ asked me, like, is this your Weapons of this year? And I was like, man, am I that guy? Like, is that what I've become?
It was said that you would destroy this and not join them.
So it's really disappointing. I have a very fixated way of looking at things, and it's hard for me to not like stop thinking about something once it gets into my head. And almost this entire film, I was just puzzled, and I just couldn't understand, like, are you retconning the whole franchise? What is happening here? There are things that happen that just don't make sense, and it's just kind of like silly. It's almost dumb. And I'm gonna go more into that in my rant, but yeah, I hate to say this, like I'm leaning probably like probably 6 out of 10, and that's kind of being generous. It might grow on me. I might get more warm to it. It's definitely a good film. Okay, like definitely go see it. Make up your own mind. I'm not trying to decide for you. I don't ever want to do that. I'm just telling you what I think. And definitely go see it for yourself. You might love it. For a lot of people, they love it, and that's awesome. And I'm glad, and I hope it's super successful and that we get another one. I really do. It just didn't work for me, and it just very much so disappointed me. So yeah, overall, 6 out of 10, which is I think the lowest I've rated any in this franchise. So yeah, it's a fun time. It's violent, shocking, it's gory, but if you take even a few seconds to think harder than just what you're seeing in the moment, then it just completely crumbles. So what were your thoughts on Bone Temple? Did you enjoy it? Is it the best movie of the year for you already? Do you think anything's going to top it in the horror world? Or did you like it more than 28 years later? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Am I wrong? Try to convince me. I want to know. I would like to love this movie. I really would. So don't think that I'm hating it just to hate it. I really wanted to love it. So let me know why I'm wrong. And maybe if I give it another shot, I'll change my mind. Peace.